Good evening, everybody. Welcome back to another live stream. Thank you so much for joining again. It feels like forever since we both did one of these because we missed last week. Apologies for that. But also since it was a Grand Prix. Doesn't it feel like a long time ago that the Bahrain Grand Prix happened? I mean, it's not actually that far away given that we had a massive gap before that. But it feels like too long because we got so hyped up by that brilliant race, didn't we? But anyway, it's back. We are back this weekend at Imola, so I cannot wait, and I know that you guys can't wait too. So hello to all of you that are joining from all over the world as ever. Anthony Flynn from LA, SVA Darris from Canada. Some worrying news from Canada today that the Grand Prix from Canada might be in some financial difficulty. And keep an eye on that. Nothing official as yet, but reporters starting to suggest that that race could be one that falls by the wayside. I hope not. Hello, Chris OY from Dublin. How are you doing? Sandy Barnes, hello from Canada as well. New Zealand as well. Goodness me, what time is it down there? Josh Smith, as ever. Hello, mate. Good to see you back again. Nutcracker, hello to you. Cheers from Ohio, says Jeff Sloan. Thank you, all of you, for joining. I really appreciate it, no matter where you are. I know for some of you it's at weird times of the morning or night or middle of your working day. However you've managed to join, whether it's now live, really appreciate you guys, or whether it's people coming back to watch later. Thank you so much. I think of all the places to start this week, we'll of course look ahead to Imola in a moment, but the big topic in the chat that I've just been watching over the last 10 minutes or so has been around sprint races. So I thought we'd start there, get some of your opinions on the proposed sprint race idea that seems to be gaining more traction. Almost looks like it's a dead cert now because the FIA, or Formula One rather, have agreed a kind of financial compensation package to give the teams effectively an amount of money for the extra running that they'll be doing over the course of a sprint race weekend. So for those who don't know, the idea is that on 3 weekends this year, as a trial, not something that's set in stone, just as a trial to see how it goes, the idea will be that on a Friday we'll have a practice session and a qualifying session in the normal format of qualifying that we have it now. That qualifying will set a grid for a shortened sprint race on a Saturday. That sprint race will take place on Saturday afternoon in the slot that qualifying would normally take place in, and then from there the order that the guys finish on a Saturday afternoon will set the grid for the Sunday's normal Grand Prix. There's no reverse grids, that's all gone. It's just a case of adding in a sprint race, cutting down practice sessions, doing qualifying, moving that to a Friday, adding in the sprint race, and then going for what will be a regular Grand Prix. Now, of course, there's loads of knock-on effects to this. What happens if you have an accident in the sprint race and damage your car? What happens to... Do we get points for a sprint race? I don't think we know that 100% just yet. But there's lots of knock-on impacts to all of this, of course. The mileage that people will be doing on components, on engines and gearboxes and that kind of stuff. There's so many things that are still to be finalised. But I want to get your ideas, because even in the chat that I've been seeing earlier, it seems to be all over the place. Some people love it, I can already see. Many of you hate the idea, don't like the idea, says Martin Van Can. Hate the concept, says Nutcracker. Sprint races are disgustingly bad, says Kaka Kamelides. Renti, though, says it might be exciting. What happens if cars are damaged during the sprint race? Well, exactly, that's a good point. But I suspect the answer to that very question is, if you damage a car during a sprint race, you fix it. And you've got all night to do that. Just like if you go off and have a crash in qualifying today, you have the opportunity to repair it in time for the race. So I imagine that will just be the same. Sounds great, says Floris D81. Cheers from Edmonton in Canada, says Roman Wazarab. Love the idea of trying sprint races. Time to shake things up a bit, nothing wrong with that. And that, I think, is where I sit. This is an idea that's, you have to remember, it's a trial. It's not ever planned that this will come in across all races. Even if it's a massive success this year and everyone loves it, still the idea is not to introduce this as a standard format across every Grand Prix. The idea will always be, if it continues, to introduce it at certain rounds throughout the championship. Part of the thinking behind that is that it will showcase certain races and they can really put a spotlight on those guys when maybe a race is struggling to sell tickets for a Friday, for example. that's instantly boosted by having qualifying on a Friday. Same thing with Saturday. TV viewers will go up when there's some competition happening over those days, as opposed to now where there's not too much on the line in terms of prizes. But also they don't want this to be something that could have a championship decided on a Saturday. So if it were to happen at the last race of the season, for example, and points were given out for the sprint race, effectively somebody could win the championship on a Saturday and then nobody tunes in for the race on the Sunday. They don't want that to happen. So this won't be a feature that I suspect ever happens at the final Grand Prix of the year. It's very much a trial just to see how it goes. And my viewpoint on this is that it's a trial, so why not? Why not give it a go? And if we all hate it, that's fine. We tried it, it didn't work. But if we don't try it, how do we know? We can all sort of say on paper it looks rubbish or we think it looks great, but we're just trying it. And in the past, you know, I have to sort of applaud that, because in the past what we've done is we haven't bothered with that phase. We've just looked at something, thought about it in our heads and said, right, we're going to go with it. And then we come in with a whole new version of qualifying. It doesn't work, and yet that's now the format that we've all agreed upon. So now you have to go through massive regulation change to undo that format, tweak it and try something different. That's a messy way to do it. So by doing it this way, I feel at least that it gives us a nice opportunity just to give it a go, just to try it out and see. Let me see. Canada is supposed to be a sprint race trial. That is very true, says yeah, absolutely, it is. And that's a very good question. So if that was one of the 3 races that was supposed to be having this, and if Canada is unable to support that Grand Prix, maybe we have to find a new venue, or do Formula One step in to try and help the race out, to try and support them a little bit and help them get over the financial tough times that they're suffering in. Don't know the answers to that yet. Yes, one watch F1 races after the drivers. No one would watch F1 races after the drivers' champion has been found. Oh wait, that's bullshit. It's not that it's bullshit. It's just that TV numbers literally do point to that. So if on a Grand Prix weekend, it was a little bit like when we. In fact, no, we didn't do that. But it was a little bit like when a driver comes into the championship on the final weekend. Everything's built up for that final weekend. Everything over a Grand Prix weekend should crescendo at the Grand Prix. That's what it is. It's the Grand Prix on a Sunday. And if the fighting's all over, done and dusted on a Saturday afternoon, there isn't the same drive for TV viewers to turn up and watch on a Sunday. And the numbers, the data literally says that happens. So it's not that no one will watch. I mean, I will watch. I'm sure many of you will continue watching, but the numbers wouldn't support doing that. So it makes no sense to try it out on the last race of the season. Isn't the name of a sprint race a sprint qualifying? Well, it is. It's a sprint race which also qualifies you for a Grand Prix, so I guess it's both. I heard that Turkey might take the slot of Canada. Yeah, that is very much mooted. Turkey is a Grand Prix venue that's on standby, that held a race, as we know, last year, a successful one, and I think a lot of people would love to see it back. That seems, at least, if you believe the reports, and that's all I can gather it is right now is reports, that Turkey would be or could be a race that could stand in. Absolutely. If there isn't some kind of reverse grid involved, it's useless, says Transient. Well, there's an interesting point. And what do we think about this? Because I am absolutely not against trying reverse grids. I don't think that a reverse grid is something that is the answer to Formula One's problems. I don't think it's something that we're missing. But I do think, like this sprint race idea on a Saturday, that it's something that we could try out at certain Grand Prix. Because why not? I don't think that, as you're saying there, I don't think this idea of sprint racing on a Saturday is useless without the reverse grid. I just think it adds some extra excitement to a weekend. We already know that ticket sales have gone up upon the announcement of these 3 sprint race venues coming into place. So we already know it's having an effect. I'm pretty sure we'll see increased viewership on those weekends, if nothing else, because people are intrigued to see what happens, as I am. Reverse grid, yes please, says Mario L. What about a random grid? Random grid, I think, is going a little bit too far, but in the spirit of trying things, I don't think we should knock anything if there's enough agreement to try something out. If it's literally a trial, we can all say it's rubbish, but until we've tried it, we have no actual proof. So I'm not against trying anything. I don't think a random grid has a place in Formula One. I think many people will argue a reverse grid doesn't either. But as I've mentioned on here many times before, we're so accustomed to the grid the way it is, the fastest car starting at the front, that's become normal, and we all sort of turn our noses up at doing it the other way round. Whereas if, you know, all those years ago we'd started Grand Prix racing by saying the fastest car is going to start at the back, that would just be the norm. There wouldn't necessarily be anything inherently wrong with that. If you've got a faster car than the guys in front, you should be able to make your way through, and that could create some real excitement. So I'm definitely not against it, particularly as things stand. As we move forward into the next set of generation of rules and stuff in 22 onwards, the idea being that most of the cars might close up a little bit, and it might be easier to sort of race each other wheel to wheel, a sort of more equitable spread of performance. If that happens, then great. We don't need any of these things. We can just carry on with the way we are doing things, and actually we'll get a more exciting race off the back of it. And there's also a great argument, if you look at Bahrain, do we need to change anything? Because it was great, wasn't it? And it's not really a question of Formula One's rubbish, so we need to fix it. No one's saying that. I think this is about experimenting, trialling new stuff, innovating, and seeing if there might be some ways to continually improve. And I think for that, you got to sort of take your hat off to them. Mercedes is the only one rejecting it, so it's happening. I don't think that's actually true, but I think it is happening anyway. I think everyone's now had at least broad agreement on the idea, and now they've all agreed on this financial compensation. I don't think there's too many obstacles standing in the way. They've just got to finalise the finer details. Surely in that case you just make sure you get the slowest time. Well, no, so if you're talking about reverse grids, fire up, the idea behind doing a reverse grid off the back of, let's say, a sprint race on a Saturday, the only way that could work obviously is if you had points for the sprint race on a Saturday. So you wouldn't, you know, going slowly might get you pole position on Sunday, but it would cost you'd get 0 points on a Saturday. So you've got to have something that entices people to go for it at all times, because points, no one's going to give up the opportunity for points. And so that's clearly the way to do that. But we're not doing reverse grids at the moment. That's just something that's been talked about in the past, but we are not going for it at this point. And Daly makes a good point. Why no points for pole position? Agreed. Now, on that one, the reason I say I agree with you, we're doing a point for the fastest lap in the race, which to me is kind of a bit meh. I mean, I still to this day don't believe it's ever added anything to a Grand Prix. Okay, you might get somebody doing a fast lap at the end. Is it exciting? Not really. Not in my opinion. It's not. It's not creating more excitement added to the race. It's a guy down in 5th or 6th place putting some soft tyres on and going for a qualifying lap. That to me doesn't add anything to the Grand Prix spectacle. If we have a Saturday in the current format where qualifying takes place as normal, for me qualifying is great. I love the format right now. I think it can be really exciting on occasions. And if you're going to give out an extra point, for me it would be for getting pole position. I think that's something that's worthy of a point and adds a little bit extra to what everyone's fighting for on a Saturday. There are occasions when pole position is not the best place to start the race. There are certain Grand Prix where you perhaps don't necessarily want to start first because there's maybe a long drag down to the first corner, for example, where actually starting second or third rather might be a better position to be in. And in those cases, there's always this question mark of, is everyone really doing what they the max they can? I'm sure they are, but look, if we took that away by adding a point for qualifying or for pole, I don't see the downside to that. They only go for fastest lap if they have a free pit stop. Yeah, I mean, absolutely, but I still think it doesn't add anything to the racing. I mean, that's the point. It's such a weird scenario that if you happen to have a big enough gap behind, you can put some soft tyres on and go for a lap, but I'm not sure. I don't know. Maybe you disagree. I don't think that adds anything to the Grand Prix. Let me see. Agree. Read the fastest lap points during the race, says Craig Barth. The thing is, Hamilton would find it even easier to win the title if he got a point for pole. Well, yes, but he would deserve it, wouldn't he? I mean, that's the point. If you're quick enough to get pole position, do you not deserve a point? Look, I'm saying this as a devil's advocate. I don't think we need to have any extra points. I'm quite happy with the points for a Grand Prix the way they are. I just don't see the point of the fastest lap edition point. And if they are desperate to give away a bonus point somewhere, for me it would be better placed on qualifying. That's all I'm saying. Gives a lower driver in the top 10 a chance for a point. It may make a difference to the end of the season. Yeah, of course it does do that. Yes, but you know, that's no different to saying somebody could you know, be in 11th and make up a place and get into 10th and get a point. You know, you have to do what you got to do to get points on a Sunday, and all of those points, of course, make a difference somewhere down the line. I just don't see it. I don't see it myself. Right, let's see. Where should we go next? Shall we talk about Imola? You guys start popping some questions in for Imola, because I don't know about you, but I'm really looking forward to it. I think it's a proper great racetrack. I know that it can be really tricky to overtake. I think last year showed that, didn't it? It's a race this time around that's got the same set of tyres, the same compounds of tyres that we had in Bahrain, so the same 3 compounds. It's a race that's probably going to be, I haven't actually looked at the weather forecast for next weekend, but we're going there, you know, early in the season. Last year we went there late. Last year we went in the autumn. This time we're going in the spring. So, and I seem to remember it being quite cold that weekend. So it could be something similar. That's one of the differentiators. It's going to be people getting tyres working in whatever conditions, whatever temperatures we have. Oh, bonus point for fastest pit stop. I see Ezzo shouting out in capital letters. I mean, all right, yeah, I still prefer that to the fastest lap bonus point. I mean, of course I prefer that. That would have been great. If I'd been part of a pit stop where we were fighting for a point, I'd have loved it. Absolutely. Okay, Imola. So same tyres that we had last time around. Different conditions. Clearly going to be different conditions to the ones we had in Bahrain, though. Very different type of circuit. Bahrain's a pretty smooth circuit. It's very open, relatively flat in comparison. Imola, very up and down, very bumpy. Even though it was resurfaced just before last year's race, I think it's still a really bumpy track. It's still got some really aggressive curbs, some of which you just have to stay clear of because they can destroy your car. It's also a track that can really bite you, as we saw last year. If you get it wrong, if you step over the line, we're not going to have the same issues with track limits that we had in Bahrain, because track limits here are typically a gravel trap. It's proper good old school stuff, which is one of the reasons I love it. So I'm really looking forward to that. I would love to know what you think about who might come out on top. I'll give you my sort of opinions on that in a moment. Raoul Vade saying it could rain. It could well rain. Absolutely. And honestly, I have been to Imola in some of the most incredible rainstorms, coming in horizontally. When it goes there, it really sometimes goes. Thunder and lightning and rain, the whole lot. If we get some of that, that really would liven things up. Yeah, a few of you saying it could well be raining in Imola on Sunday. Griptopia, I'd stay away from that one, mate. Where are we? Let's see. Who's going to do well, in my opinion, in Imola? Well, let's see. Anyone else got an opinion on that one? Yeah, well, a few of you saying could it benefit the Honda teams as it did last year? Well, let's talk about that quickly, because a couple of comments this weekend or this week from Franz Tost, and I don't know if you saw this, but Franz Tost suggesting that the leap that they have taken at AlphaTauri is 70% come from the performance of Honda's engine and 30% from their car. That's a huge chunk to come from the engine, and it kind of tallies, doesn't it? Because if he's saying that, I'm sure there's definitely truth in that. You would be more likely to suggest that a team principal would more likely swing towards his own team, saying we've done a great job. He's saying openly and honestly that Honda have delivered a 70% of their performance increase has come from them. And if you think about how Red Bull have leapt forward as well, that would tally in quite nicely, wouldn't it? That performance from Honda has taken a giant leap. And as somebody rightly pointed out there, last year, Honda did really well there, didn't they? They looked like a really strong team, and I would expect the same again. This is a circuit, if you think back to Bahrain, where okay, let's say Mercedes, they won the race with Lewis Hamilton, but they clearly weren't kind of firing on all cylinders. They weren't 100% in the sweet spot all the way across the race weekend. Some of that will be down to the fact that we had hardly any testing, and the Bahrain Grand Prix weekend was probably a weekend where most teams were collecting the data that they would have normally collected in the sort of third, fourth, fifth days of a test, pre-season test. We didn't get that opportunity. And so, it's very much a learning weekend. And I think that's one of the things that shuffled up the order a little bit, and people will get on top of that as we start to move further down the line. I also think that it was a very, very open track. It was very windy in Bahrain last time out. You're sort of in the middle of the desert. I mean, around that circuit is kind of nothing for a long, long way. So that's why you get so many really aggressive sandstorms coming, because the wind is a little bit like being next to the sea. The wind just sort of sweeps in off this massive, expansive, flat surface, which is the desert there, and it just sweeps across the circuit. And I do think that had a massive effect on certain cars. Certain cars that have a little bit more aero sensitivity to changes in wind direction, and clearly the Mercedes was one of those. I think I saw George Russell suggesting the Williams was pretty much the same. Similar, I guess, aero concept to that car, on that car as well. And look, I don't think it's going to be anywhere near as windy. It's a much more built-up circuit. Imola's right in the middle of everything. There's trees, and it's a much more protected circuit from the wind perspective. So we're not going to suffer from that. So that should be a constant that people don't have to worry too much about. So maybe you could say there's something that's advantage Mercedes if that was a weakness for them last time out. But this is also a track that's a very different type of configuration. And as we saw last time out, that Honda power unit massively excelled around the ups and downs of this Imola circuit. And if that continues to be the case, and they bring this boost in performance that everyone suggests they've brought, that's advantage Red Bull and AlphaTauri, isn't it? So I think this could still be really closely matched, but I do think Mercedes won't be struggling in the same way that they struggled in the early part of that weekend. It's going to come down to tyres, like every single race weekend does. Whoever gets on top of those quickest and keeps them in that right window is going to come out on top, and that makes such a huge difference. It seemed to me that in Bahrain, Red Bull had a real good handle on that, which is not something they've been particularly good at. We know Perez has that as one of his own strengths. If you can tie that in with a car that also has those strengths, they could be really, really strong this weekend. Just check the weather for Sunday. Rain showers, says Nutcracker. Fantastic, love that. Always love a bit of rain. Do you think Red Bull pushed for the new rules knowing it would help their car? No, I don't, says Bradley Austin. This is a debate that's been raging over the last couple of weeks, isn't it? I think Lewis Hamilton even suggested that the regulations, and we're talking about the sort of aero regs, the trimming in of the floor, the diffuser and the brake ducts at the back end of the car, suggested that was a rule change done specifically to hamper Mercedes. I honestly don't believe it was. I believe that there's no way that the FIA could sit down and come up with those trims to the floor. These are relatively minor. They're significant in that, you have to put a lot of work into recovering that lost downforce, but they're relatively minor. And when you're doing that on paper, before a car's actually been created and driven anywhere, you don't know the answers to those questions. You don't know who it's going to benefit and who it isn't. You can have an idea, but this is so much of a fine margin between who it was going to favour and who it wasn't. Even the teams weren't 100% sure. And so I don't believe for a second this was designed to hamper Mercedes, because it could have quite easily fallen the other side of that line, and actually maybe we could have found that it really helped Mercedes and gave them a huge advantage over everybody else. And then what would we have all been shouting? So I don't believe it was a designed-in performance prohibitor for Mercedes. I think it was literally done on safety grounds at the request of Pirelli, trying to just generally slow the cars down. It does look clearly like it's having a bigger effect on either the low rate cars. It looks to me like there is some evidence to suggest that, of course, but also I think you've got to factor in the possibility that other cars have maybe done a better job this year than Mercedes. Red Bull and Honda, if Honda have made a giant leap forward with their power unit, if some of Mercedes' advantage over the last few years has been power unit, and now that's been cut down or lost, you lose some pace, you lose some performance, and combine that with a little bit of an aero tweak that might have cost you something, and that can shuffle up the order. So that's my view at this point. I think it's too early to say, you know, with absolute clarity of what was the purpose, what was it doing, what is happening right now, who it's favouring, who it isn't, and why. I think we need a bit more time to fully understand exactly what's going on. Then why did they ban? Well, banning engine modes in Spa was of course 100% to do with Mercedes, but I'm not talking about that. I'm talking about the aero changes for this year. So of course the FIA have made changes in the past to hamper a certain team that's out in front. I mean, come on, we all know that. But I'm just saying I don't think that this particular aero change was one of those. If they just wanted to hamper Mercedes, there are so many other ways they could have easily done that, more specific to Mercedes. Let me see. Give the F1 drivers F3 cars for the Saturday sprint race. I would love that. But look, do you know what? I know that's a crazy idea and it isn't going to happen. But, you know, what we are seeing here is a new version of Formula One that's willing to experiment. Just jumping back to the sprint race idea. We're looking at a new type of F1 that's willing to try new things. Now, you go back 5 years, you go back 10 years, under Bernie's Formula One, that's never going to happen, is it? That's never happening. We're never going to try anything new. And if you think about Bernie's F1, we didn't try much new stuff. We went pretty much in the same business model of, you know, selling to broadcast television as our main source of income, of prohibiting anybody from creating content from within the paddock. Now we're shifting all of that. We've got a new commercial rights holder that's willing to try new things and to experiment with things like new broadcast models and encouraging people to embrace social media and engage with fans and trying out things like sprint races and esports and all sorts of different things that are now being experimented with. I think that's great. They may not all, you know, land on the mark. We might see some that we try and they epically fail and maybe we don't ever see them again, but that's fine. That's what trial is for. So I kind of appreciate the fact that we're in a new world of Formula One that's willing to experiment, and who knows where that may go. And the reason I said it was off the back of that comment about F3 cars. Who's to say at some point in the future we might not see all the drivers hopping into some kind of standard vehicle, some kind of standard car for a demonstration race, for example, that maybe might start off just as a bit of fun, but might become some great entertainment. Why not? We've always said it can't happen because of commercial deals and, you know, partnerships, and we can't have a driver from Mercedes getting in a Renault powered car, whatever it might be. Of course we can't have that, but there might be solutions, and at least now we're willing to look for those solutions rather than just immediately write them off. And even off the back of these changes that Liberty have brought in, the teams are becoming more open to things like this too. So look, I think we're on the brink of a new era of Formula One that potentially could be quite exciting. Who will get the most points this weekend, AlphaTauri or Ferrari? Good point. Battle of the Italians in Italy. Who's going to go? I would actually go for AlphaTauri, you know, and that's not a clear-cut decision, because I think Ferrari have definitely taken a step forward from last year. Obviously they have. It would be really bad if they hadn't. But they've definitely taken a leap forward. But AlphaTauri perhaps I haven't actually seen, I'm sure someone's done the percentage improvements from this year to last year to this year. I'm pretty sure AlphaTauri have got to be right up there as one of, if not the biggest leap in performance. So I think AlphaTauri could well come out on top of this one. And on that subject of tips for the Imola Grand Prix, have you yet got the Seedstream app? The predictions page on the Seedstream app is now open. They open up for those predictions 1 week before the race, so in race week. You have to pick your top 5 finishing order for the Grand Prix. I've just done mine. I had a terrible week in week 1. If you guys were in that, let me know how you got on. But I think I'm only about halfway down the entire table after race week 1, and that pesky switch over right in the last moments of Hamilton and Verstappen cost me big time. I'm sure it cost a lot of people as well. But yeah, if you haven't done it yet, download the Seedstream app. You'll find it in the Android and Apple app stores, and then you can get your predictions in and see how we all get on. Uzair Syed, I did a prediction. Good. How did you get on? Or was that for this week? You've done a prediction for this week. Let's hope you do well. Anyway, right, let's get into more about Imola. That's what we're talking about. Who do you think is going to do well this weekend? We've talked about AlphaTauri. I definitely think they'll be strong. I think it's going to be close between the two at the front. Let's say, if we're going to say it's Verstappen and Hamilton, which I think it probably is as the season goes through, I still think those two are going to be great. I'm really intrigued to see Sergio Perez, if he can get a clean weekend. I'm really intrigued to see how he gets on. I still don't think he's quite got the full handle on that car yet when it comes to a lap. But we saw a real aggressive drive from him, as we've become used to with Sergio Perez in the race. And I think if he can get starting further up the order, we could really see him in the mix. And I'd love to see that. I think lots of people would love to see him do well. Sebastian Vettel, G. Thompson says, Vettel looks a bit deflated. I think he's lost his mojo. Don't think he'll get it back. That's a really interesting talking point, isn't it? Sebastian Vettel, because, I mean, look, I think I said to you this the other week. During that Grand Prix, I was watching the first half of that race, and Seb made a number of overtaking moves. And I actually had the conscious thought, I nearly tweeted it to say, wow, this is great. You know, Seb's making some wheel-to-wheel moves, and he's doing them well. He's getting through it. He's getting a little bit like the old Seb. He's moving forward. He's not afraid to go wheel-to-wheel with someone. And then he goes wheel-to-wheel and runs straight into the back of another car. And it was an epic failure, and unfortunately reminded us of the Seb of the last couple of years, where that's become almost commonplace. He did look, if that was the worst way to start his Aston Martin career, wasn't it? He looked utterly deflated, and I think, G. Thompson, I'm with you a little bit. I really hope I'm wrong. I hope Sebastian can turn it around and get his mojo back and get back to a leading position, get back to his best, whatever that looks like. But it's going to be really hard because the car wasn't as quick as perhaps some people thought it was. That opening weekend was just a disaster from a personal perspective for him. But look, a good result can quickly turn that round, and if he were to get one this weekend, it would be a very different story. I really hope that happens, because I don't want to see anybody looking as low and down as he did at the end of that Grand Prix weekend. But I have a lot of respect for Seb. I want to see him back where I think he belongs. If not winning races, putting in strong performances. He should be leading that team. That's why they've employed him at probably great cost, and I'd love to see him get back to that. And he always blames other people. Well, that was also, that compounded his terrible weekend. Very publicly, of course, he blamed someone else, and it clearly was his own fault. He didn't come out of that anything around that looking good at all, did he? But as Jason Casey Eggleton says, I really hope he gets back to how he was, because he's one of the best people in F1. I agree with you. Right, Bottas, underrated or overrated? Question. That's a great question for you lot, because you know why. Bottas, right? I'm going to say overrated, underrated. I don't think either. I think he's actually rated about where he is. I think he is not one of the. He's not a Verstappen or a Hamilton. He's not in that bracket, and I would maybe put Daniel Ricciardo up there in that bracket too, or around the fringes of that. I would say that Valtteri Bottas is in the next bracket down, whatever that is, whoever's in that bracket, but not top tier, but a very, very good driver. And on his day, he can deliver top tier performances. But the problem with Valtteri is he's not consistent. And if you look at Max Verstappen and you look at Lewis Hamilton, most of the time you look at Daniel Ricciardo, their performances are consistently great. They consistently get the best out of whatever they've got in front of them. Is how I would categorise those people. But I think that's what most people would say if you asked them about Valtteri Bottas, that he's a great driver, or he's a good driver, but maybe not one of the all-time greats. And maybe that's fine. I think the problem's going to come this year, because in the past it's been fine, hasn't it? Because Mercedes have had very little in the way of competition. If Mercedes now are up against it and need, and I hate to call him a wingman, but if they need a wingman for Lewis Hamilton, is Valtteri going to be good enough at every circuit to do that? Is he going to be able to get between a Lewis Hamilton and a Max Verstappen and play that rear gunner role, which the team will need him to do more than ever? I'm not sure he can. I'm not sure he can. It's looking on early signs like Red Bull have enough performance to be right in the mix, if not right at the very front. And therefore, both of those teams, Red Bull and Mercedes, need both cars to get the most out of their fight. If either of them want to win a championship, they can't do it with just one driver. Valtteri used to put Williams in near podium positions, says John Norris. He's a great driver. I'm definitely not saying he's not a great driver. He is. He's now being measured, quite rightly, against his teammate, who is one of the greatest of all time, and it's showing him up a little bit. And now that Max Verstappen is joining the party at the front, and maybe others as the season unfolds, Valtteri really has to step up, because he's now just not only being measured against Lewis, but he'll start to get measured against some of those others that are at the front of the field too. So this could be a seminal year for him. I suspect he's got it in his own mind that he thinks this may well be his last year in Formula One. And if he has got that mindset, this could end up being a disappointing season for him. If he's not fighting for a future contract to Mercedes, or if he thinks he's on the way out, if he thinks Mercedes are favouring Lewis or favouring a George Russell or whoever might be coming in next, he's the sort of guy that could start to affect him, but we'll have to see. Bottas is a very good number 2 driver. I would agree with that. He is a very good number 2 driver. He has been, without saying it out loud, a very good number 2 driver. But is he good enough to be a number 2 driver when the team he's driving for has outside competition too? That's the question. We'll see. Let me see. George Russell showed him up, says fire up. I don't think George Russell showed him up. I think, I think it was, if you think about the race where George Russell stepped in for Lewis Hamilton, I mean, George did an incredible job. I mean, let's make no mistake, he did an amazing job. But Valtteri also did a great job. The reason that it appeared a bit more so that George showed him up was in the race, of course. They were on totally different strategies. And there was that occasion, particularly during the end of the race, where George Russell, after having the nightmare of a pit stop, put some really soft, fast tyres on, then blitzed past Valtteri towards the end, didn't he? And it had the appearance of, and for somebody who's watching that day of racing without knowing enough about the sort of nuances of the strategy of that day, it very much looked like this young kid, George Russell, had just come in and just brushed him aside, because that's what he did on the racetrack. But of course the strategy was totally different. So I don't buy that he actually absolutely showed him up. I think George did an amazing job, but I also think Valtteri had a pretty decent weekend. Let me see. Bottas beat Massa, who was a 32nd World Driver Champion. No, he wasn't. I always pick people up on this. Felipe Massa was never a Formula One World Champion. I love the guy to bits. I have the most respect for him, but he was never a World Champion. So everyone who says he was a World Champion for 30 seconds, he wasn't, because the race hadn't finished. He did an incredible job that year. And there were so many reasons why Felipe Massa deserved to be World Champion that year. And look, we were in Brazil. I think almost everybody outside of our garage wanted him to win on that day and become World Champion in front of his home fans. I mean, there's a tiny part of me that would have loved it too, but he wasn't World Champion. Having said that, Bottas did beat him and beat him convincingly, and I think that's one of the reasons why I think Bottas is a very, very good driver. If Lewis wasn't in F1, Bottas would have won titles. Right, there's a good point. There's truth in that, because let's say Lewis Hamilton didn't exist and Valtteri was in the car that Lewis has had over the past few years. Well, the main thing stopping Valtteri winning almost every race was mostly Lewis Hamilton, wasn't it? But that's only really because there wasn't much of an outside competition, and that's what we're now starting to get to, where there's a Red Bull that could potentially take race wins away from them, maybe other teams as well as we move forward. That's going to be the difference. So yes, Mercedes have had such domination over the past few years. There is a great argument to say that whoever was the lead driver in that team had the tools underneath them to take all of those world championships. Lewis did it consistently. That's something that not everybody would be able to do. But there's nothing to say Valtteri wouldn't have been a multiple world champion. But that's timing. That's a little bit like, DC when he was with us. Came up against Mika Hakkinen, who won 2 world titles. He then when Mika left, he came up against a Kimi Raikkonen, who was one of, if not the best driver on the grid at the time. One of, certainly. Up there with Schumacher. And DC was an amazing driver. He was just at that team, at the fastest team, at the wrong time, when the guy on the other side of the garage was perhaps quicker. So, yeah, that's all a question of timing. And Valtteri, whilst I'm sure he'll be very grateful for the time he's had at Mercedes, the race wins, the opportunities he's had, he's come up against somebody who, unfortunately, we have to all accept has just been better. Right, let's see. Yeah, I mean, I agree. Whoever's saying that, Truffle 12. If Lewis wasn't in F1, his teammate would have still been another top tier driver. Yeah, of course, there would have been someone else in that other seat who would have been his biggest competition. And obviously, it depends who that was, whether he would have taken those titles or not. Agree. Let me see. It's glitching, is it? Oh, sorry. Oh yeah, I can see that on my screen. It is glitching. I don't know why that is. Okay, I mean, I can carry on. I don't know what's happened to my face. There's not a great deal I can do about that. I think that's at YouTube's end. I'll keep going because you can hear me. Can you hear me? I hope so. Right, I tell you what. Let's pop another screen up. Oh, look, there you go. You see me pop out there? Hold on a minute. Let me just pop that over there and see if when we go back it sorts it out. Sorry, 1 second. Right, let's try this. It's still frozen, isn't it? Okay, sorry guys, I don't know why that's frozen, but you can you can stare at a blank screen, a frozen picture of me, and I'll keep talking as you can hear me. That's probably all you really need. No one really wants to stare at my ugly mug anyway. Right, let's where are we going then? This is great. Yeah, I love it that you're all saying this is the best part of the show when I've frozen. I love it. Can you see me pop out? No, it's gone. Anyway, right, let's pick up where we're going to go then. Which suits best at Imola, Mercedes or Red Bull? We sort of covered that a little bit, didn't we, earlier on? I think it's going to be really tight, but my money, I think, will be... I think Red Bull will suit the circuit based on what we saw last time out, but I think Mercedes, as they always do, will have left no stone unturned in trying to figure out what went wrong last time out and how they can improve that. So I think it's really off-putting just seeing that frozen picture of me in front of me. I think Mercedes will have made some massive progress since last time out, and that, you know, we'll see the fruits of that this time. So that's going to be one of the most interesting things, I think, as to who's overcome the problems, who's learnt most. Because although we haven't had cars running on track for a couple of weeks, you know, things behind the scenes are moving at an incredible pace. They always are in Formula One. Hold on, let me see if I can sort this out. What is going on here? Let's just give it right, I'll tell you what I'm going to do. Give me 1 second, guys. I'm just going to turn my camera off and then turn it back on again, because that's the kind of technical genius that I am. Do a quick off and on. Hold on. Oh man, I can't even turn my camera off. Right, let's keep chatting while I try and muck about with this. Cursed like the second Red Bull. I am, aren't I? Technically cursed. My actual camera is... Oh, there we go. Turned off. Let me see if I can turn it back on again. We'll see if we get somewhere. Yeah, sorry, Josh. I know it's a weird image of me. Let's see. Have we got my face back again? It's bloody frozen still. What's going on here? I don't know what to say for people, but it's there you go. This is what we got for the last 15 minutes. If you want to leg it, I accept it. That's fine. But I'm here. I'll still keep talking if anyone wants to keep listening. Okay. Right. Yeah, there you go. Frozen me again. Let's see. Come on, give me a subject and we'll pick up on it. What do you think of James Allison stepping back? Ryan Collins. Yeah, good one. And someone else I saw earlier on, actually, I meant to pick up on this. What do we think about the new structure at Mercedes? Is this the beginning of the end? Somebody pointed out. First of all, I would say I definitely don't think it's the beginning of the end necessarily. I don't think James is stepping back. I just think he's changing his role. He's actually sort of moving up in the organisation, I guess, isn't he? To a more overseeing type role. What's been great about Mercedes over the last few years is that they have built a structure at that team that, you know, I may have mentioned, I've definitely been talking about this in my podcasts. They've built a structure that can sort of generate sustained success. This is not built around one person. You know, I think if Lewis Hamilton leaves, they clearly can bring in a George Russell or somebody else and continue winning because they've got a great car. If a James Allison were to leave, they've got enough strength in depth that someone else could step up and move over. And that's kind of what's happening here. They're moving people from within the organisation who have grown up, you know, through the way that that this organisation has grown over the past, you know, whatever it is, 7, 8, 10 seasons. So they're all kind of been you know, educated in this way of doing things, in this philosophy. And that's why they all are very more than capable of stepping up into new positions and continuing it on. So I just think I think that's why they will be successful. I don't think this is needs to be a worry for Mercedes fans that certain key people are moving around. I even wouldn't be too concerned if one or two of those people, you know, left. I just think they've built such a great structure in the organisation that lots of people are able and willing to step up and take over those positions, and I suspect that is what's going to happen. So I certainly don't see it as the beginning of the end. I see it as a, you know, you're almost empowering further people. Mike Elliott, who I know, you know, used to work with us at McLaren, great guy, really clever man, is stepping up into a new role there, and I already know he'll be brilliant. He's been at Mercedes for years, so he knows the way they work. This is just about moving things forward. I really don't see it as moving things backwards in any way. So I think it could be great. Let me see. Why was there a 3-week break after race 1 rather than trying to keep races 2 weeks apart? Well, I mean, look, F1 calendars are a very complex thing. They are a very difficult thing to manage. And it isn't just a case of, right, we want to race every 2 weekends. There is so much to figure into it, particularly at the moment with the COVID protocols in place. And certain circuits and certain countries and certain territories have so many different things going on with the way their virus is looking, with other events in that country at a certain time, with public holidays, and there's so much weather, there's so many things to factor in, which is why the calendar looks the way it does, trying to link it into other racing championships to avoid major clashes. So look, they've got so many things to figure out. It's really not just a case of someone sitting there going, oh, I think we'll have a 3-week gap here. It's just the way things have worked out. And I honestly don't know the exact details of why it happened that way, but there will be a good reason. It's not just that someone's decided that's the way we want to do it. Let me see. Alpha Tauri to be the third best in Imola again. I think they could be third best team, but I definitely think there's a good possibility we could see an Alpha Tauri pop up onto the podium. I think, in fact, in my seed stream predictions that I've just done of picking the top 5, I think I had Pierre Gasly as P3. Getting up onto the podium there, so who knows, but I think they've got a really strong chance, particularly around this particular circuit. Marc's not frozen, he's just a very good ventriloquist. Right, are you he's trying to move faster than Mazepin? Leave it out. Lewis goes back to McLaren in 22. No, definitely not. I don't know what's going to happen to Lewis Hamilton after this year, but I genuinely don't think he knows. I mean, we've covered this before, but one thing I'm almost certain of is that I cannot see Lewis going to any other team. I can't see Lewis moving anywhere. The thing is, if he were to go, I mean, I heard someone say, what if he went to Aston Martin? if Lewis went anywhere else at the moment, he's beginning another long-term project. You know, you've got to start building the team around you. You've got to start learning how that car operates. And there's no way Lewis Hamilton wants to embark on a project like that at this point. I suspect he'll do this year. Whether that's it, I still don't know. But if he does more, it will be with Mercedes. And when he's finished with Mercedes, I suspect very strongly that he's finished with Formula One. It would be a lovely sort of full circle to come back to McLaren, but I would almost bet my house on the fact that he won't. Can you see Bottas staying in 22? I don't think so, and I say that not because there's a George Russell waiting in the wings. I think that's a big part of it. I think Toto Wolff. I heard him talking on the High Performance podcast last week about how the driver interaction between his two drivers is a really important factor. He absolutely will only pick two drivers that he believes will get on with each other. And, does he see that a Lewis Hamilton and let's say a George Russell would get on better with each other? Or does he think that it might be a George Russell and someone else? Could it be a Valtteri Bottas and a George Russell? So, look, there's more at play here, but I think that George Russell... There's a huge question mark over Lewis. I think, Valtteri Bottas, I think will be, if Lewis Hamilton were to walk away, maybe that leaves the place open for Valtteri Bottas to hang around and play a similar role to the one he's played, but do it for George Russell. They'll never write that down into his contract, but I suspect that's what could end up happening. But I'd be more inclined to think that Lewis will be intrigued to find out what the 22 cars are going to be like, and therefore won't necessarily want to walk away. So this could well be Valtteri's final season at Mercedes. However, having said that, a driver that's been at the championship, the class leading, the dominating team for as long as Valtteri has, brings an awful lot of knowledge and understanding and technical know-how, operational know-how to another team. He becomes more valuable because of where he's been for the last 7 years. So there's nothing to say that would spell the end for Valtteri in Formula One. I think I have my new desktop background. Why would Marc go into the new Gen F1 with a new driver lineup if they can help it? Yeah, I don't think they would. I don't think they would if they could help it. I think, if Lewis Hamilton wants to stay, I very much suspect he'll stay. I can't see if Lewis's performance... we saw a great performance in Bahrain. If that continues this year, if it's as good as he looks, why would you? I mean, yes, you can save some money, but he is still, in my opinion, the best on the grid. And that's what you need. If you want to succeed, you need the best. You can argue, and people argue this all the time, that anyone could have won over the last few years in a Mercedes. In some cases, there's an argument that lots of drivers could have done. Definitely not anyone, but lots of drivers could have done. But look, the competition might get closer than that. We're already seeing it. If Mercedes are under threat now from another team, from a Red Bull, for example, well, then they need that last 5% that a driver like Lewis can bring. And look, we see the difference between Lewis Hamilton and Valtteri Bottas. If you were to find out what a percentage that was, if you said that was a 2% performance increase over a season, let's say, I've just made that up. But if it is, that 2%, you need it. Because if you've got Red Bull nipping in from behind, looking over your shoulder, breathing down your neck, that 2% is the difference between winning or not. That's why you have a Lewis Hamilton in your team. I'm sure Lewis wants to drive the 22 cars with ground effects, says Just Trans One. Yeah, I agree. I think that's the thing. Most drivers will want to do that. I think Kimi... surely this is Kimi's last year, right? Right? We've been saying that for a long time. But I think that's anyone who ends up walking away or being forced to walk away at the end of this season is going to be gutted, aren't they? Because, it's like anything. They're on the brink of experiencing a whole new generation of Formula One car. And, to miss out on that for a Formula One driver, I think would be pretty gutted. BB King 1977, that 2% was on display in Bahrain. It was. That Lewis Hamilton's 2% was absolutely there. McLaren get third again, says Jean Cartier. McLaren get third again. There's no reason why not. is going to be tight again, as it was last year. And let's face it, McLaren got third last year, but with a couple of things just falling a slightly different way, they could have been fifth. And, you know, they're in that mix again. I think it's going to be a very similar thing, isn't it? I think, you know, if Aston Martin or Racing Point last year hadn't had those points deducted, well, they'd have been third. So there's lots of little details like that. It's going to come down to DNFs. It's going to come down to making a right strategy call. It could come down to a dodgy pit stop somewhere here and there. Those tiny differences could genuinely change the order in that pack, just behind the top 2 or 3 teams. You've probably got AlphaTauri in the mix there this year as well. You've maybe got Ferrari now rejoined that group. So that section, that portion of the grid is, I think, going to be even tighter than last year. But there's nothing to say McLaren should not be right at the front of that. They look strong. I think everything's going well. And, you know, I think they're heading in the right direction. So, yeah, I think it could be great. Marc Veshour says, wow, that Seedstream app has improved a lot since I first looked at it about a year ago. Thank you, Mark. It has. We've put an awful lot of work in. We totally rebuilt it, in fact, and only relaunched it just before the first race. So if you haven't yet seen it, please go and check out the Seedstream app. It's just worth it. It's well worth it. I use it every single day now as my go-to place for all F1 news and content. And I think you'll enjoy it too. So just go check it out. 4 minutes to beer o'clock. Thank you very much. McLaren won race. Is that right? It is, isn't it? Well, that's gone fast. How does an hour pass that quickly? I am definitely going to have a beer, and then I've got to go and record my podcast, which I've left a bit late this week. The last podcast in the first series, episode 10 of my first series of Pit Lane Life Lessons. If you haven't yet checked out the podcast, please go and find it. You can watch it on YouTube. You can download it from wherever you get your podcasts from. Look, go and have a look at it. There's a whole series now of almost 10 episodes that you can watch at your leisure or listen to at your leisure when you're on a dog walk or driving in the car. And it's all my lessons that I've learned from Formula One that I'm sharing with you to hopefully improve your lives somehow. So that's what I hope you'll get from it. Go and check it out, and I'd love to know what you think. I think that's probably it. Well, a couple of minutes. Let's have a very quick one. Does Aston Martin question legality on McLaren's rear diffuser? No, I don't think so. And I don't think there is any question mark over the legality of McLaren's diffuser. It looks very legal to me. I will download the Seedstream app after this live. Thank you, Josh. Yeah, if you could all go and do that, that would be great. And join the Predictions League. It's all free. Get yourself on the Predictions League, and we'll see if we see who comes out on top after this weekend. Let's go to the pub. Yes, Josh, back to the pubs in the UK today. That was a big moment, even though it was snowing here this morning. Will you release another book? Yes is the answer to that, but don't ask me to put a time frame on it because I don't know when. But yes, I 100% have got at least one more book in me, maybe two. It's 10 p.m. and that means it's the end of this stream. I am sorry that we had a total freeze on visuals. I don't know what happened there. Apologies for that, but at least you could still hear me, and maybe it was even better without having to watch. So there you go. Yeah, thanks for the radio show, says Josh Smith. Thank you all for joining. I really, really appreciate it, as ever. Keep the questions coming. Download the Seedstream app. Download my podcast, Pit Lane Life Lessons. Have a wonderful week, and I'll see you after the, well, let's say the Imola Grand Prix, because I haven't got time to read out the full length of that Grand Prix. But have a great one. Enjoy it. And I'll see you soon, guys. Ta-da!